Good afternoon. My name is Betsy Carr, Senior Marketing Manager at Pureport, and I would like to take a second and welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Enabling AWS Transit Gateway over AWS Direct Connect, a step-by-step guide. First, I would like to go ahead and introduce today's speakers and then cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be presented by Gary McAuliffe, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Pureport, and Johnson Coffin, Vice President of Solutions Engineering for Pureport. All attendees' lines are muted and the call is being recorded. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session using the question feature located in your GoToWebinar panel. Please feel free to type in a question at any point during today's presentation and we will answer it at the end of the call. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn the call over to Gary.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you all for attending today. It looks to be that this webinar will be our highest attended webinar in Pureport's history. So we're really excited about the interest in this topic, and we're really excited that all of you could join us today. I'm Gary McAuliffe, and I manage our strategic partnerships here at Pureport, which includes our relationships with the cloud service providers, carriers, data centers, and a variety of ecosystem partners, including our DevOps partners like Red Hat Ansible and HashiCorp's Terraform. I've got with me today Johnson Coffin. Johnson is our Head of Solution Engineering. Johnson and his team help our customers design, build, and manage their cloud-enabled networks here at Pureport. Johnson, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Good day.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start with a high-level introduction of AWS Transit Gateway. And I say high-level because this webinar is not intended to be a deep architectural deep dive of Transit Gateway. Our solution in our webinar today will talk about how you enable Transit Gateway over Direct Connect, and more specifically, a Pureport-enabled Direct Connect. I would encourage you for questions or deep dive questions on Transit Gateway. Feel free to connect with us, but even more importantly, connect with your AWS account team and particularly your solution architects to help you kind of analyze whether Transit Gateway would be a good fit for your AWS environments. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about AWS Direct Connect and how it enables or has the potential to enable Transit Gateway. We'll then talk a little bit about where PierPort fits in the mix and how we can enable Transit Gateway over Direct Connect. And then Johnson will end, as I mentioned, be a step-by-step demo of the solution to actually show you how easy it is to enable this capability through the Pureport platform. To start with the background on AWS Transit Gateway, I'm going to borrow a few slides from the launch announcement last November. As many of you know, AWS announced Transit Gateway at reInvent last November to much fanfare. It was a solution that a lot of folks were anticipating and excited about, and I think it's gotten a lot of the buzz at reInvent if you were in Vegas last year during reInvent. So what was the driver for Transit Gateway? You know, AWS saw that customers wanted to interconnect their virtual private clouds, their VPCs, and their on-prem network. So as you can imagine, this hybrid cloud environment, they wanted to be able to globally scale, and they wanted to dramatically simplify their network configurations. What was causing some of these challenges? Well, first of all, the complexities of building out point-to-point peering and the fact that just really didn't scale. Before Transit Gateway, if you wanted to connect your VPCs within your Amazon environment, you could build basically point-to-point peering sessions leveraging VPC peering. And if you had two VPCs, that was a relatively simple process, right? You just basically built a point-to-point peer session between those two VPCs. But as you started to scale, it became a much more complex. And to be able to connect all of your VPCs together in a full mesh, you could leverage this algorithm or this mathematic to basically come up with the extent at which the VPC peering would expand exponentially as you added VPCs. So for 10 VPCs, you'd literally have 45 different connections between all of those VPCs to make sure that they were in a full mesh. Go to 100 VPCs, which, believe it or not, is not unheard of within most enterprise accounts. and you were already at nearly 5,000 VPC peering sessions as part of that solution. And not only was that unruly, it was actually not supported. Because there was a limit with VPC peering of 125 peers per VPC, it was not even doable. So thus, AWS, added other components and solved other problems like VPN bandwidth limitations that were also solved as part of Transit Gateway, and the simplification of monitoring and management of routing was also a major play. So in November of last year, they announced AWS Transit Gateway. The goal was to easily interconnect potentially up to thousands of VPCs and your on-premise networks. So you could kind of think of the AWS Transit Gateway as a hub, allowing you to make connections from your various VPCs into that hub, as well as to various on-premise data centers and other environments, so that as you built out additional VPCs, you did not have to basically peer with all of your remaining VPCs. You could build out a one connection or peer one time with the Transit Gateway and dramatically simplify the process of making that connection. So what are the features of Transit Gateway? And again, I'm keeping this at a relatively high level. I hope that you will work with us and your AWS account teams to dig at this in a more detailed level. But key features of Transit Gateway included centralized routing policies across all of your VPCs and on-premise locations. So you made it much simpler to build out your routing policies. Obviously, scale was the big thing, right? The ability to support thousands of VPCs and not only do it within one account, but the ability to link multiple accounts. You can imagine customers that have inherited accounts based on M&A activity, or even the natural growth within a large enterprise as more and more different department level activities created more Amazon accounts, the need and the requirement to be able to connect and peer not only those accounts, but the VPCs within those accounts amongst each other. Important to basically improve the connectivity of the VPN experience as it related to Transit Gateway. Also, the ability to have much more flexible segmentation and routing. And this could come into play as an enterprise grew, how they wanted to connect various departments, business units, et cetera, became a huge play. All this simplified the management of your AWS environment and allowed for pretty much infinite horizontal scale as you continue to grow, and added new connections on your customer premise side, as well as new VPCs on the cloud side. So while Transit Gateway was extremely interesting when it launched last year, one of the limitations was it launched without support for AWS Direct Connect. Fortunately, AWS remedied that in the spring of this year by announcing support for Transit Gateway over AWS Direct Connect. I think most of the people on the call are probably somewhat familiar with Direct Connect, but let me take a step back and give a quick explanation. AWS Direct Connect enables private connectivity into your AWS workloads. At PierPort, we like to call it a backdoor to your AWS workloads, or a private backdoor to your AWS workloads. The benefit of Direct Connect is multiple. There's multiple benefits. One of the key ones can be an economic benefit. As you know, as you continue to leverage a hybrid cloud environment and have data flowing from your AWS workloads to your customer prem, all of the data traffic that comes over the general internet is charged at a higher egress bandwidth rate, starting as high as 9 cents a gigabyte. Leveraging Direct Connect dramatically reduces the price of egress bandwidth all the way down to as low as 2 cents a gigabyte, and can really impact the financial impact of maintaining a hybrid cloud environment. In addition to that, customers also were seeking higher performance with Direct Connect, and instead of kind of being suffered or dealing with the inflexibility of the internet, you could basically build a private network connection from your on-premise workloads to those workloads that were held in AWS. Excuse me. So where does PierPort fit into this? So we call our solution the MultiCloud fabric. Our goal is to seamlessly orchestrate private connectivity into all of the top cloud providers. Everything we do is done at layer 3, so it's all enabled at BGP. And the goal is for us to provide very easy interconnections of sites and cloud networks, and the ability to do that in just a few minutes with no hardware required. You'll see that as Johnson gets into the demo, how easy it is to spin up connectivity into AWS and in turn spin up connections to Transit Gateway as part of that process. We are an AWS Direct Connect partner, and we're also a partner with other major cloud providers. Our customers can access our multi-cloud fabric in a number of ways. Obviously, the ability to connect via a private connection is very important, and customers can access us today from about 150 Pureport-enabled data centers here in the U.S. We expect to grow internationally later this year and early next year, and expect to add regions in both Europe and Asia Pacific, along with our connections to 150 data centers in the U.S. We can also connect to our platform, or a customer can also connect to our platform leveraging VPN capabilities. This could be, you can imagine a remote site that you are comfortable connecting over VPN, potentially the integration of an SD-WAN environment, or we expect to launch later this year support for mobile clients, where a customer from a VPN client on their laptop and or device can access the PierPort multi-cloud fabric and then connect to each of their cloud providers privately from the multi-cloud fabric. All of this is intended to be turned up in minutes, and the bandwidth can be adjusted at any time. No longer are customers required to make long-term commitments at particular bandwidth levels. You can basically spin up and spin down bandwidth and connections to PierPort on an hourly basis. This enables a very simplistic ability to connect via a hybrid cloud model. As I mentioned, because we're already lit in about 150 data centers in the U.S., we have immediate and private on-ramps to the public clouds from each of those facilities. All you need to do is enable a cross-connect into a network that connects you to the PierPort cloud-enabled POPs strategically located at most of the on-ramp locations in the U.S. By enabling that private connection, we offer lower latency and low jitter from the network connection, improving the customer performance. Also taking advantage of the egress transfer cost savings so that customers who are still leveraging a hybrid cloud model can save from that infrastructure. We can deliver our solution between 50 megabits and 10 gigabits per second, enabling a wide range of connections for a wide range of customers. We also can enable the multi-cloud fabric to enable either private or public peering within the cloud providers. In AWS's case, this will allow you to privately connect to both your private network resources like VPCs, or to privately access public services, things like S3 and DynamoDB. The net is this is very future-proof, it is infinitely scalable, it will continue to add more functionality, more clouds, more capability, and more data centers to help you scale your environment. At the time AWS was launching the Transit Gateway support, they also built out a new program for Direct Connect partners. It's called the Service Delivery Designation for Direct Connect partners. And basically what this enables is a new process in which Direct Connect partners had to go through some additional levels of scrutiny to make sure they were delivering Direct Connect and network connections into AWS at the highest standards. No longer were carriers able to or consider the ability to oversubscribe network connections. All network connections were done at a one-to-one connection point. And PierPort was one of the first people to make it through that process. The hosted connection model before this new designation limited the ability to deliver direct connects to 500 megabits per second. Fortunately or unfortunately, Transit Gateway requires a 1 gigabit or larger connection to be able to leverage and use AWS Direct Connect. So it was a critical component for partners to be able to add this new designation so that they could add larger connections, that 1 gigabit or higher, that would enable the Transit Gateway capabilities. You can go out to the Amazon site and the Direct Connect partner page to see a list of partners that have enabled this solution, and PierPort is proud to be one of the few in the US that can deliver that capability. So let me finish with a little bit of architecture kind of discussion about the environment and talk about how the PierPort multi-cloud fabric enables connection to Transit Gateway over Direct Connect, and then we'll move into the demo part of today's session. So PierPort has cloud-enabled POPs in many of the key data centers in the U.S. connecting to a variety of cloud providers. For today's example and demo, we'll use the Washington, D.C. location, which for PierPort is in Ashburn, Virginia. Customers connect to the PierPort multi-cloud fabric in a number of ways, as I mentioned, through those data center connections via simple cross-connect in a redundant fashion through 150 data centers, or by leveraging a VPN connection throughout anywhere that a device or solution can terminate an IPsec tunnel. Once connected to the PierPort fabric, PierPort then leverages, again, another redundant set of gateways. And these are basically virtualized, containerized routers that enable redundant connections into AWS Direct Connect and onto the AWS Direct Connect gateway. Once connected to the Direct Connect gateway, a customer can then provision an AWS Transit Gateway connecting all of their VPCs and then connect the Transit Gateway and the AWS Direct Connect gateway together. In this example, we're showing 4 VPCs, but obviously this works for up to thousands. Every time you add an additional VPC, you can imagine the simplicity of only connecting or only peering with the Transit Gateway one time versus having to build out additional peers to every previous VPC in your network. And so AWS has dramatically simplified the connection to the VPCs, and PierPort likes to think we've dramatically simplified the connection to AWS Direct Connect and Transit Gateway. With that, I'm going to turn over the solution or turn over the webinar to Johnson, and he's going to do a quick demo of PierPort's multi-cloud fabric, and then we'll follow up at the end of the session with some questions and some closing comments.
All right, thanks, Gary. And again, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. On my screen, you see the PierPort self-service console, which is a web interface customers can use to interact with our platform. So this demonstration is really reflective of the customer self-service experience. That said, as I think Gary mentioned, we are API first, which means that everything I do in this interface is also available directly via our API to our customers and also via our Terraform and Ansible integrations. Today I'm going to use the PierPort platform to connect to AWS Direct Connect, and from there attach to a Direct Connect gateway, which in turn is attached to the Transit Gateway. Just real quick before I start, I should mention that on the AWS side, I've already built the Transit Gateway. You can see I've already got that Transit Gateway here attached to several several VPCs, 3 in this case, and also to my Direct Connect gateway. The steps to put all this in place are outside of our scope today, but I wanted to make sure I called it out as a prerequisite. So let's get started building out that Direct Connect. I'll start by opening a new empty network in the PierPort console. Here you can see the 5 core locations that Gary mentioned. Again, these are where we have on-ramps to the various cloud providers, where we support our VPN gateway. Obviously, we also support physical port here and in those 150 plus other locations that Gary mentioned. So from here, I'm going to add a new connection. We'll choose AWS Direct Connect as a connection type. We'll choose our cloud region, and we'll map that to the nearest PierPort location. Next, I've got a peering type. Again, we support private, transit, and public. Gary mentioned kind of the difference between those. I'll probably hit on that again as we get into the AWS console and start to walk through completing the transit VIF there. But I'm going to choose private/transit, which obviously can be used for either one of those connection types. Since Transit Gateway does require a 1 gigabit minimum size connection, I'm going to choose 1 gig as my speed. Next, I'll need my AWS account ID, which I'll copy and paste out of the AWS console. For the BGP settings, when I created my Direct Connect gateway, I went with the default ASN. So we're just going to leave that set to the default. It's really important to note, though, as you're building this out, that your Transit Gateway and your Direct Connect gateway can't share that same ASN. So keep that in mind as you're building your network out. I'm going to skip over customer networks and NAT configuration. Those are really only needed if you've got IP conflicts you need to mitigate. It's another feature we cover in one of our YouTube videos or one of our upcoming YouTube videos I'd encourage everybody to take a look at. And lastly, we'll just give this guy a real quick short name so that it's identifiable. We'll pop over to the AWS console, and here we can see that those two HA redundant direct connects have populated here in the console. They're currently in the ordering state. So from here, typically what I would do as a customer is I would come in, I would accept each of these connections. That process typically takes somewhere on the order of 4 to 5 minutes. So for the purposes of this particular demo, I'm going to jump into a network that I've already got built out with a pair of direct connects that I've already got pre-built, or already accepted rather. So heading back over to the PierPort console, I actually have here a network that's mostly built out. You can see I've got a few connections to locations. I've got a connection to another cloud, and I've got a connection to AWS that you'll notice is red. That red actually indicates to me that, yeah, the connection is built out. However, there are a few more things that we've got to do to bring it up. In this case, you can see that the BGP status is down. That's because I haven't actually built the transit VIF for the primary gateway. In the interest of time, I actually did go ahead and build out that secondary, so we'll only complete the config on the primary. A couple of the things I want to point out here real quickly before I build that out. We've kind of intelligently figured out all the network primitives that you need to complete that peering. That's going to include your IP addresses. It's going to include providing RASN. It's going to even include auto-generating a BGP password that you can copy and paste between the two. The other thing, as Gary mentioned, is each one of these 4 connections I've built out includes 2 of those containerized routers. So what that means is, as you build out additional connections to your network, not only are they all joined together in a full mesh, regardless of which PierPort location they're connected to, and that's important because you're not hairpinning back to a single router, back to a single location, or back to a single cloud, but you've really got any-to-any connectivity with no hairpins. The other really important thing is, as you add those connections, the network performance scales out horizontally with the number of connections you build out, so you're not having to come back and revisit some central construct that maybe has a limitation and manage that. So the next thing I'm going to do is just quickly copy my PierPort ASN to my clipboard. We're going to jump back over to the Direct Connect section of the console. Here I've got my Direct Connect that has been accepted but does not have a VIF created yet. Next, we'll see that there are 3 different peering types I can select from. Gary kind of hit on these a little bit, but I'll go back over them super quick for everybody. Private peering is for connecting directly to a VPC or directly to a Direct Connect gateway that then connects directly to one or more VPCs. This is great for simpler networks and obviously something that we've supported for a long time. Public peering, as Gary mentioned, is used to connect to things like S3 and DynamoDB over Direct Connect. It's outside of the scope of this presentation, but again, I'd encourage you guys to check out our YouTube video on this. We greatly simplify the process of building that public peering by providing all the public IP addresses, the public ASN, and again, making the process just super quick and painless. And then lastly, obviously, the transit VIF, which is what we're going to build today, is what's used to connect to a Direct Connect gateway that then in turn connects to a transit gateway. So we'll give this guy a quick name. You can see that it's already selected that connection that I selected earlier. I'm going to select which one of my Direct Connect gateways I want to connect to. You can see I've got one built out there specifically for connections to Transit Gateway. We'll populate that ASN that I had already copied to the clipboard, and I'm just going to finish out here real quickly, copying and pasting the rest of these fields. Bear with me just a moment. And the last one's going to be that password that we auto-generate. And we'll click Create Virtual Interface. So again, that peering is going to take 2 or 3 minutes for it to complete and come up and for BGP to complete. But again, I have already configured the secondary VIF, and as a matter of fact, if I jump in and show you that one, you can see that it's available. And if I drill down into it, you can see that the BGP status is up. Same thing's reflected back on the PierPort side. So let's jump over and actually look at my transit gateway and see what that guy looks like. Again, here are my associations. If I jump over to the routing table inside that transit gateway, you can see the routes here at the bottom for my 3 VPCs. And you can also see 5 routes that the transit gateway is learning from the Direct Connect gateway, and then in turn from the PierPort network. One other quick thing to note is that back on the Direct Connect side, looking at my Direct Connect gateway that I built out for the transit gateway connection, we've actually got a gateway association, and I've only allowed a prefix that's much larger than the prefix that's announced by those 3 VPCs. I'm kind of getting into geek speak here, but basically what this does is allow me to announce a summary route instead of each individual route for each one of my VPCs. Not important when there's only 3, but it's pretty darn important when you're talking about connecting thousands of VPCs back to your PierPort network. So back on the PierPort side, let's take a look. We can see that primary gateway, the BGP status is now up. He's now got a direct route back to the AWS networks. And again, you can see each of the other routes that were listed on the AWS side. They're labeled with which one of the connections they came from. So you can see 3 routes from my branch office, 1 from my data center, 1 from the other cloud. And those are all, again, built out in a full mesh, no hairpins, and each one with their own pair of HA, fully redundant and scalable routers. One other thing I want to mention is that now that primary connection and the secondary are both up, since we support equal cost multipathing, and so does AWS, potentially, depending on your network flows, you could take advantage of that and get up to double the throughput while they're both up. Pretty important, certainly for bursting, but it's a nice feature to have, to be able to take advantage of both those links when they're both up versus it being an active passive. So that's it. I want to mention that my team and I would certainly be happy to help you guys brainstorm on how you might leverage the PierPort multi-cloud fabric as part of your cloud networking plans, including how we interact with Transit Gateway. So please do reach out. And with that, Betsy, I'll turn it back over to you for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Gary and Johnson. At this time, we will begin the Q&A portion of today's presentation. If you would like to ask a question, you can go ahead and type it into the question feature on your GoToWebinar panel. We did receive a few questions during the presentation, so we'll go ahead and begin with those while we queue the rest of the questions. The first is, how does pricing work with the combined solution?
I'll take that one. So obviously we're talking about 3 kind of core elements to this solution. There is the basically the Transit Gateway solution, and you can obviously go to your AWS account to see the specifics or granularity of the pricing. There is an hourly charge for Transit Gateway to enable that as part of your solution, as well as some egress bandwidth capabilities and pricing. Same thing for Direct Connect. To enable this solution we demonstrated today, you would need to provision an AWS Direct Connect connection. That is also charged hourly based on the size of the connection. It also will benefit or give you the benefit of the egress pricing discount, which can be pretty dramatic and candidly can cover the cost of all 3 components as part of that solution. So, and then the third element is the cost of the PierPort platform. Like most cloud solutions, we do bill in increments of an hourly basis. So you have the ability to kind of spin up and spin down the solution to meet your needs as part of that solution. So there are 3 elements and there are 3 price components. Feel free to reach out. Our pricing is available online, as is the AWS pricing available on AWS console.
Great. Are you planning to take care of the Transit Gateway and VPC management and monitoring in AWS?
I'll take that, Betsy. I don't think we've got any plans to necessarily take over directly managing any of the AWS components. We can certainly, advise on how they interact and interoperate with the PierPort network. But as of today, we don't have any plans to become a direct partner to manage the aspects of the internal AWS environment.
Okay, great. Our next question is, can I use my current AWS Direct Connect?
It's actually a really good question. So if your current AWS Direct Connect is already attached to a Direct Connect gateway or already attached to an existing, directly connected to an existing VPC, you potentially could reuse that circuit, but you would have to remove it, kind of tear down that connection, and then assuming that it's 1 gig or above, and assuming that you're going through a partner that actually supports Transit Gateway, which again, you guys want to check out the partner page to get a list of those. Then potentially you could reuse that to build into a transit VIF. Typically, what we see folks do though is they deploy a new Direct Connect circuit if they do want to migrate over to Transit Gateway. The other thing that's really important to note, and I meant to cover it during the demo, and I neglected to, but if you've already got an existing Direct Connect gateway and it has connections to private VIFs, you can't then connect that same Direct Connect gateway to the Transit Gateway. You've got to build a new Direct Connect gateway that doesn't have any private peering in order to connect to the Transit Gateway. So, hope that answers that.
So, any more bets? Oh, looks like we have one other question. There was a question basically asking a couple of comments or questions associated with relevance to Azure Virtual WAN. In other words, how does this compare with that? I for the sake of today's webinar and the sake of our coverage on the AWS solution, I think we'll table that. I mean, the PierPort multi-cloud fabric is meant to enable connectivity to a variety of cloud providers and provide fast private connections, and we can do that. I think we'll kind of save that question for another day for a different webinar topic, just so that I'm not kind of cross-connecting various cloud platforms as part of our coverage today. All right, I think that was it. We really appreciate everyone's time today. We wanted to kind of keep this pretty fast and moving so we could get you back to your day. Please feel free to reach out at any time if you'd like a private demo or want a deeper dive on this conversation with a smaller group. The one thing I'll say, because of the way PierPort's multi-cloud fabric is structured from an hourly pricing perspective, we have the ability to do some very inexpensive, no-risk POC. So we can spin up connections literally hours at a time, and the impact and ability to do that is very simple and easy. We'll be glad to walk you through that. Also, if you want to help or if you need help connecting with your AWS account team and we could help be a conduit, we'd be glad to do that as part of that process. So thanks everyone for your time. My contact information is there, and we look forward to connecting with you at a later time.